Hello and welcome back to the Comic Lyra podcast. I'm Ryan, also known as Comic Stan. I love comic books. My co-host loves regular books, with all the words and such. But I make him read comic books and then we talk about them in depth. And with me, as always, is my aforementioned shadowy co-host, it's Jamie.
What?
Shadowy, what do you think of that? Is that, you do cast a shadow?
I do cast a shadow. I cast quite a large shadow.
I was prepared for you to deny it. I was going, no, I've seen you cast shadows.
Even a small man can cast a large shadow if he stands in the right light.
Is that a fortune cookie that you just opened?
I'm pretty sure that is from Song of Ice and Fire. I think it's something Tyrion says.
See, I told you he bloody read books. Because he called it Ice and Fire. That's the nerd. He didn't call it Game of Thrones like us plebs.
Well, no, it's a Song of Ice and Fire. That's what the books are called.
I know. I'm just reinforcing the intro because any chance I get to be like, see, I told you he read books.
I've taken to reading in my lunch breaks again.
That's good.
I've been really disciplined about it.
You've not had time to read as much.
No, I have time to read again. It's amazing.
That's really good because then I think at the end of the podcast we should do what books have you been reading, what comics have I been reading, kind of thing.
Yeah, we could reintroduce
we used to do that.
We did used to do that.
Yeah, we both got very busy in very separate ways, didn't we?
Yeah.
But now we're back and things are almost back to normal, and yeah, we can give the people what they want, even though no one's asked about it.
To know what weird novels I'm reading at the moment.
Well, your weird novels, my weird comic books, totally. Both of them. So, back this week with Ultimate X-Men, like we said last week we would. Men of our word. We never say we're not.
We actually did it.
We actually did it. And it's a really interesting one. I've got a lot to say about it, but mostly positive. Little clue for later.
Me too.
And
actually,
I think after we talk about the comic, we should then mention
John Cassaday.
John Cassaday, indeed, who unfortunately passed away recently. And I think it'd be good to just go over a bit of his work.
Legend in the field.
Yep.
It's a real shame. It's a real loss.
For my sins, I did not know his work, unfortunately, before his passing.
Right, and then you fucking look it up and you're like, exactly. Oh my God, he did everything.
Exactly.
Yeah, what an artist. What a fucking artist.
Exactly. So a lot to say there. And incidentally, ties in to the comic we were doing this week, which between us, I almost called lucky. And then I was like, that's not a word you should use for someone passing away. And,
yeah, absolutely.
And timing working out for our shitty little podcast. But the reason it so happens is it's incidental because the character of the comic we're covering today is actually co-created by Cassaday. So unfortunately co-created with Joss Whedon, scandal noted. Yeah. So we're not going to talk about him, but we are going to give the artist his dues finally. So
yeah, I think so. I mean, it's interesting because a little story time here.
Ooh, story time.
Ryan and I once did a podcast episode about a comic book written by John Romita Jr.
It was written by I can't remember. It was art by John Romita Jr. I can't remember, but it was the Amazing Spider-Man.
The art was by John Romita Jr. And somebody at work recently found out that I do a comic book podcast and got notably and visibly excited, right? Because he's a comic book fan.
They're in the wild.
They're out in the wild. I met one in the wild, and he's a really cool dude, and I quite like him. And so we chatted about comic books back and forth a little bit, and he was telling me about some of the artists and writers that he'd met at cons, and we were talking about who our favorite comic book artists were, and I was like, oh, I really love John Romita, and he went, oh my God, I met John Romita Jr. And I just sort of looked at him and went, I shat all over his work once. Like, his dad was fantastic. I think he's shit. And he went, are you talking about that fucking Amazing Spider-Man run? And I was like, yes. And he went, yeah, you need to check out his earlier work. Apparently John Romita Jr.'s early work is fantastic.
So I've heard apparently he's good on, I think it's Frank Miller's Daredevil.
Yeah. That's literally what, yeah.
So maybe at some point we should do that, and maybe we'll do a apology to Romita Jr.
Absolutely, yeah, because it was one of those where I was like, yeah, it was the Amazing Spider-Man run from a couple of years ago or whatever.
Yeah, and to his credit, I don't know if this is to his credit or not, but the worst thing about that series, soon after the 5 issues we started with, the writing just absolutely dropped it. I have done a rant on a previous episode, I can't remember which, but telling you all the things went on. And do you know, the series kept going after that, and it kept getting worse. They did worse things after my rant about it. The worst thing was they unceremoniously killed Ms. Marvel. And everyone knew she was coming back soon anyway. Like, the whole point of it was a retcon to turn her into a mutant when previously she was an Inhuman.
Cool.
But the way they did it, it was I'm not going to get to the whole thing again, but it's like, hey, Ms. Marvel, what are you doing in this comic? seemingly no reason.
We've
you're
talked
dead.
about this. We've talked about this.
Any of your closest friends or family here? No, but Spider-Man here, and for some reason, the Fantastic Four. Did they know her? Probably not. But there you go. So, Ultimate X-Men.
Yeah, so who wrote it, who drew it? Let's get the credits out of the way, because I have so much to say.
Well, it's a little quicker this time around because it was actually written and drawn by one Peach Momoko.
Peach Momoko.
Exactly.
One to watch.
Exactly, and did both of the work. Also did a very lovely little tribute about her work, her using the Armor character, as she's known, co-created by John Cassaday. She did a little... thanks for creating this character that I'm now doing this great work with kind of thing. So that was nice to see. But yeah, great one to watch for seemingly good writer and artist.
Yeah.
I say seemingly because we've only had these 5 issues, but they are really good.
So, starting with the arting. I came into this not really knowing much about it. And I'm going to be entirely honest with you. It wasn't until they started trying to name themselves that I even remembered that it was an X-Men comic.
That's good.
Because it looks like a manga.
It's so different.
And so it really reminds me, the only thing that I can describe to somebody who's not read it and who's not familiar with it, the only way I can describe it is that it kind of has a similar vibe in the way it looks to Scott Pilgrim vs. the World, except it looks nothing like it. So it's a Western comic in a manga style, set in Japan with overwhelmingly Japanese characters, but also in the X-Men universe. And it looks beautiful. It has this really soft, painterly thing going on.
The textures have been so specifically chosen because a lot of the Karma scenes are watercolor effect. I don't know if actual watercolor, but certainly that effect.
That's why I said it was very painterly.
Yes. To the point where specifically seeing the white gaps in the blue sky or the green fields, intentionally put a rough watercolor effect, which looks beautiful and has that rustic look of actually being done on paper.
So it's very painterly, and I think if you're an Aponophile, you will adore this. If you are in any way interested in Japan or Japanese art or Japanese culture, this is the Marvel comic for you, right? I've never seen a Marvel comic which is deviated from the Western comic book style to the extent that this has, particularly not one on a flagship property. Yeah, this is X-Men, and it looks like a manga. I mean, so when I say it's similar to Scott Pilgrim, it doesn't look anything like Scott Pilgrim, but it is a comic book in the manga style which reads left to right as opposed to right to left.
Yes,
and the only sort of
coloured as opposed to black and white manga.
Yeah, totally. Yeah. And the only reference point I had for that in my head was Scott Pilgrim. Obviously, you read a coloured version of Scott Pilgrim.
Yes.
When I read it, it was black and white. I read the original black and white version. And so, it doesn't look anything like it, but it's stunning. It's visually gorgeous throughout. This artist clearly knows her shit. She's done a fantastic fucking job. I love the colour palettes. I love the character designs. And the thing I loved most about it were those gorgeous splash panels.
Yep. I mean,
fuck me, those splash pages, Ryan.
Any panel, I think of this, if it was a splash panel, if a smaller panel was just a whole page, they'd all be beautiful. They're all great.
And so there's this sort of disparity between Ryan and I sometimes, I think, or you and I, whereby you're sort of more there for the story a lot of the time, and I'm kind of more there for the art.
Yeah.
And that's not
gives
a hard
good balance.
Yeah, it gives a good balance. It's not a hard and fast rule, and, we're both absorbing them as a text, but in general, I'm a bit more focused on the art than you. You're a bit more focused on the story than I am.
Yeah.
If you are a comic book reader who reads comic books for the art, which I'm discovering from chatting with some comic book readers is how a lot of them do, this is one for you, man.
Absolutely. This is a contender for best art of the year.
Oh.
Prestigious Cheers and Jeers 2024.
Something is going to have to go a long way. For me to enjoy the art in something more than this, it's going to have to go a long way. The last comic book that I enjoyed visually as much as this was probably Into the Woods.
Beneath the Trees.
Beneath the Trees, fucking Into the Woods.
You the same rhyme, essentially. You just got the wrong part of it.
The wrong part of it.
You got the spirit, the details were not correct.
But yeah, Beneath the Trees is the last thing that I enjoyed visually as much as I enjoyed this comic book.
Yeah, absolutely.
It didn't matter what was on the page. However, that being said, the story was pretty all right.
Yeah, I really enjoyed the story as well. Before we get to story, I've got details of the art that I wanted to address as well. Like, that's how good it was. Normally with good art like this, it can be samey, like in the sense that they've got a good style and then it's just that consistency all the way through. Like, they've got a good thing and they keep going with it. With this, it goes so bleak and drab at the correct areas, you know?
Yeah.
There's points where it gets dark and that enhances the story so much.
Yeah.
All the color, which is so beautiful at the beginning and in the normal parts, is just gone. It's just complete grey, but it's shades of grey, so it looks great.
Yeah.
I noticed there's some monster activity, which we'll get into, which is not a surprise if it's an X-Men comic, but the actual texture of the art or the color changes from watercolor for most of it, with obviously penciled lines, to charcoal like sketching. So like some of the apparitions, as we'll get into, are like I don't know if it's charcoal specifically, but it's like a rough black kind of.
I mean, it's all digital, but yeah.
Yes, the texture is what I mean specifically. Yeah. But the fact that it changes so well and seamlessly, like it's only in these bigger pages with some genuinely creepy looking things. Right?
Yeah,
I've got a picture of something which is from the first issue, I believe, but it's a shadow monster, and we'll get into what that relates to. But the eyes on it, which I'm now showing Jamie a picture of, the eyes really got me, where it was like almost unnerving. Like, not quite to the level where I didn't want to look at it, because I was looking at it like seeing how amazing it was, but the way the eyes pierce into you and are so contrasted from the blackness of its body, which again is in this rough, again, charcoal-esque kind of texture,
it's great.
Is just so great. And to go from beautiful, serene things to then this, I thought was just the range on the art was so good.
Yeah, totally. I mean, and again, I can't stress enough the fact that this is a fucking Marvel comic.
Exactly.
And you know, we've established that, in my opinion, I tend to prefer Marvel over DC in terms of the art style. And I do think Marvel are up for taking more risks than DC are in terms of what they put out. But this is way the fuck out there.
Yeah.
For a big 2 comic, this is so out there, and I think it really can't be said enough that this does such a good job of introducing manga conventions and sort of things that would be really, really apparent and obvious to manga readers into a Western comic. And it's super cool that, I mean, the name of the person who wrote it you gave me sounds very Japanese, so I'm going to assume she's probably Japanese.
Peach Momoko, so probably. And I'm probably butchering the pronunciation of the surname.
Yeah, totally. So probably written by a Japanese woman. And so, you know, it's very authentic, and there's nothing sort of, you know, there's no appropriation of that culture here. It's her inhabiting the Marvel universe whilst also celebrating her cultural tradition. I think it's fucking cool.
Yeah, and still kind of within the realms of art, but it has these pages at the end, or the glossaries or indexes or something like that. But it basically just tells you about a bunch of Japanese stuff, like things in Japanese culture, for not that much connection to the story. Which, for me, if it's not supporting the story, I'm like, oh, who cares? But it's just nice. It's just nice little insight into Japanese culture.
I think it's cool because this is so very Japanese, but obviously intended for a Western audience. And so it kind of gives us an insight into things that we wouldn't usually understand. And there's a little bit of a sort of cultural education that comes with it. I do have a couple of issues with the visuals.
Right.
None with the art. And again, I don't know that this is an issue because I think it was stylistically the right choice, but it was the penciling on the speech bubbles for the shadow monster.
Okay.
Really hard to see. The lettering was really hard to make out for me. It was one of those where I had to sort of stop and scrutinize it for a minute to see what was being said.
Interrupted the flow of reading it.
Yes. That being said, it looked cool.
Yes. The fact that you can't immediately tell what they're saying maybe like adds a little bit of like a what's going on here kind of thing.
Exactly. Like it was definitely form over function.
Yeah. It's not you being like, what swear word are they using here? Like,
yeah, exactly. Like it didn't impede me from reading it. It just slowed me down. But I am willing to accept that it was a interesting stylistic choice, and the font, the typeface itself, the font they used was cool. Like, it was a really cool sort of sketchy, glitchy typeface with, you know, inconsistent kerning and inconsistent ups and downs on the letters. Like, it was a cool typeface that really fitted the character. And so there was nothing wrong with it, but it's just an observation I had. And again, it's one of those things that, you know, I can have a little gripe with something, but also see why it was done.
Yeah.
And appreciate it for what it is, right?
If anything, when something is really good, the tiniest of inconsistencies or negatives kind of shine through more, because you look at something great and you go, it could have been perfect if it done this. Like,
and this is me nitpicking, because again, even though it slowed me down a little bit, on reflection, looks pretty cool. Like, even though it slowed me down and it's something that I noticed, that doesn't change the fact that it looks good on the page.
Because also comparatively to things that are kind of bland and mid, which unfortunately is the problem with the comics medium, is we don't get a lot of like proper bad stuff to really get into and crucify. So with the mid stuff,
that much fantastic stuff like this.
Well, exactly. And
this was like, so I use food metaphors a lot.
Yeah, I think we all do, to be fair.
I like food. I'm a big guy. The Marvel stuff that we've been reading a lot recently is like double cheeseburgers, like a McDonald's double cheeseburger, which, to be honest with you, I can fuck one of those up at any point.
Yeah, it's fun, but it's not sustenance. It's not.
Yeah. Like, I can always fuck up a McDonald's cheeseburger, particularly a McDonald's double cheeseburger. Those are, you know, it's the perfect burger, but it's not super interesting. This is like you've put a really great sushi roll in front of me.
Yep.
And like, there's not a lot of it, but fuck, is it good?
And to be fair, we're going into, we're going to only be covering the first 6 issues because that's all that's come out so far.
I'm so excited to keep reading this one, bro.
Oh, 100%. And that's the thing, is we're starting in so early into this run.
Yeah.
Like, it's got so much to go. What's great is it's selling really well. I was going to do this anyway because I'm into this new Ultimate Universe.
Yeah.
And I'm going to get into that in a minute as well, because I like how you keep pointing out, it's like, as if they're doing this with this bigger title. I want to get like why I think they're allowing this kind of experimentation. But the Ultimate Universe is like a separate thing from the main 616 universe, and because of that, they are able to, I think they have taken these swings of like, it's a new thing. Like, this was the second title of the Ultimate Universe after Ultimate Spider-Man. And yeah, they're taking a big experimental swing, which I think has really paid off, because this is selling quite well in comic book stores and whatnot. It's being talked about, so that's great. Like, they'll keep going, especially now in issue 6, which is still like one of the top 50 comics selling or whatever.
Obviously, just because of the sheer amount of stuff that we have to read to make this podcast work, we end up reading things digitally.
Yes.
Don't we? This is one that I want to go to my local comic book store and
you
try
want to
and
get some hard copies.
I want some hard copies of this, man. Like, I want this on my bookshelf.
Potentially, like, give a few months after these single issues, and we might they might do the trade paperback of like the first.
That's where I'll go.
Yes, rather than buying all the individual issues.
I mean, I'll probably buy issue 1 if I can get it. If I can get my hands on a copy of issue 1.
I tried to get issue 1 of Ultimate Spider-Man, and I think they're still out. Like, they're still selling.
Did we read Ultimate Spider-Man?
Yeah, we read Ultimate Spider-Man. That was the one that was so part of like it.
Did I like?
I think you liked. Yeah, that was Jonathan Hickman, and it was different because that was so. This whole, I'm going to get into this whole Ultimate Universe thing. In Spider-Man's one, he wasn't Spider-Man. And he was like middle-aged Peter Parker, who then became Spider-Man.
Yeah, that was fun.
Yes.
I like that.
So this Ultimate Universe, as I said, separate from the 616, and I'll give you I'm going to do a brief overall universe where we are with this, and I'll shoot to you for the overall story explainer thing.
Yeah, do it.
Again, first 6 issues, we'll try and do non-spoil as much as we can for a bit, but we're going to get into, again, first 6 issues, we're going to get into it very quickly and after the non-spoiler part. And if you like it, you can read what we've talked about and keep going with the series.
There will be another issue next month. In a month's time, there'll be another issue.
So the Ultimate Universe was a thing they did back in the day.
Yeah.
Well, back day, I mean, like, I don't know, mid-2000s, I think.
Right, okay.
Again, a reason to just reboot all the superheroes, because all the main line ones had this backlog of lore and backstory that they had to contend with.
Yeah.
So they wanted Spider-Man to be back in high school again, as a prime example. So they did Ultimate Spider-Man. Then, because they wanted to do something crazy, they killed the main Spider-Man in that universe and replaced him with Miles Morales. So Ultimate X-Men existed within this Ultimate Universe as well. They did some crazy stuff with that later on, including Pietro, Quicksilver, and Wanda, Scarlet Witch being siblings, but not normal siblings, more like the Lannister siblings, if you know what I mean.
I don't know.
Like Cersei and Jaime Lannister.
I don't know what you mean.
If you get what I mean.
I don't know. I'm from Norfolk, mate.
You know what I mean. You know. And
I'm going to make you say it.
I mean, the people get what I'm saying. But they also, Magneto was their father. Then it turned out that, or it at least heavily implied that Wolverine was their dad, maybe. And then he, at one point, was watching them without them knowing in some scene or whatever. And then it got really crazy. A bunch of characters died in really violent ways. At one point, the Blob ate... I think it was Janet Van Dyne, Wasp.
I don't know who that is. For Wasp.
And then Nightcrawler tried to killed him by teleporting a shark into his stomach.
So a bunch of dumb shit happened, basically.
Yeah, they went really edgelord, like who gives a shit kind of stuff in the whole Ultimate Universe generally, right? So then they ended the Ultimate Universe with the Secret Wars, which is what they're basing Avengers, the next Avengers film coming up is going to be on. And only 2 characters made it from the Ultimate Universe to the mainline universe.
So Miles Morales, fan favorite, got into this universe by meeting Molecule Man, who was the main powering thing of Doom's Battle, Earth, wherever. Who was the other one?
Miles Morales survived because he had a week-old hamburger in his pocket.
Nice.
And the other one, more consistent with what we're talking about today, is the Maker. The Maker is the evil version of the evil ultimate version of Reed Richards, Mr.
We've
Fantastic.
talked about this on the podcast.
Yes. And the reason I'm bringing it up again is because this Ultimate Universe has rebooted in an entirely new thing because the Maker created a new universe from in the 616 universe and has basically using that and time travel cultivated this universe and made him like the secret emperor of the world kind of thing. So in this world, there's like a council of people that basically answer to him, but are like seemingly the world leaders. Yeah. And they've kind of divided up the world into territories, which they each run. And the entire of Asia is, at least East Asia, I don't know about West Asia, but it's all under like control of like a couple of mutants, right? So this is the world we're in now. What the reason I'm saying all this, what I like while reading all this, none of this comes up in the comic, right? No. So you're thinking, Comic Stan, why the hell are you selling us all this? I like it because I like the fact that there's this wider picture going on that I know is happening in this universe, but it's not touched on, if that makes sense. Yeah. I like that we're seeing a snapshot of a universe, because this, again, same universe where Spider-Man, middle-aged Peter Parker has just become Spider-Man again as well. So I like seeing this corner of the world and these isolated stories taking place in this grander thing. Similar to the Song of Ice and Fire, Game of Thrones kind of stuff, you know?
And so this story is a small story. This is not a big comic book story. And so we have a young teenage character who is being visited. So one of her friends died a few years ago. And she is being visited by a shadow monster and basically finding other mutants to deal with the situation with. Basically, yeah. Quite a kind of standard manga story, but also kind of Western as well, isn't it? Yeah, I mean, it very much is. It's something that wouldn't look out of place in a manga, but nor would it look out of place in a Marvel comic, which is what it is. Again, my synopsis was brief because, to be honest with you, not much happens.
Yep, and that is an interesting aspect compared to normal comics, because the only other part I want to get into before we get into the spoilers is this does not follow the traditional superhero comic thing of adventure. That and a 5-issue arc. Because like by the time we get to issue 5, they are only slightly closer to unraveling like this whole issue.
So, I mean, I suppose by issue 6, they have met the human mutant behind the shadow monster.
Well, we think. We don't know for sure. I think it's up in the air whether they've met them or, you know, because
they've had an interaction with them out of shadow monster form.
Well, because part of this story is the idea of not knowing what's real or not
Yeah.
trusting your senses and that kind of thing. So I think there's a lot of like possible red herrings and stuff like that we're going to get to, which I'm loving. I love this slower pace compared to normal comics.
And again, I say not much is happening, and I think that comes across as a complaint or a negative thing, but it isn't.
There's a lot more character building.
Yeah, it crams a lot of stuff into not a lot of plot. It crams a lot of story into very little plot, is what I'm trying to articulate.
Yes.
And so we get a really good look at our protagonist. All of the ancillary characters and the secondary characters in this, we get quite a good look at. And, you know, all of the dialogue is really lush. And really interesting. There's one particular piece of dialogue that I made a note of because...
You making a note of the dialogue is a significant
change.
Well,
I think it's higher praise than when you do it.
If
I'm being entirely honest,
I make too many notes, if anything.
Yeah, you know a lot more stuff down than I do. But I wanted to be able to quote this. Yeah, so essentially a video of the protagonist displaying some element of her powers has been posted online, and her friend says, "Gee, social media is scary. Go viral in your public property just like that."
Yeah.
And I was like, wow, that is the truest statement I've seen in a comic book ever.
Yep.
And again, you know, comic books sometimes, Western comic books will sometimes really gun for profundity, and they'll try really, really hard to say profound things. This is verbalized in the verbiage of a teenager, and it's not a high concept. They've been able to say something quite profound there and very true without trying. And that to me is infinitely more fascinating and more compelling than somebody really trying hard to be profound and missing the mark.
Yeah, it felt more natural. Like the writer just got to a point when they went, "Oh, I could put this line in." But it wasn't like I need to put a profound line about social media in here somewhere. It just like felt like it got to the point where that line just felt natural. Like,
yeah, totally. But you go viral and suddenly you're public property. That's a sentence.
I made a note about one early on, which was the main character showing how kind of isolated she is from the rest of the school.
Yeah.
With a very cutting remark by one young boy in her year who says, "I bet her depression is contagious."
Yeah.
And I like that because I was like, that encompasses a lot in a little. Like,
yeah, doesn't it?
There's a lot of it. There's a lot of backstory in such few words, which I thought was good. So I think getting into the main story and all this. Oh,
there's one thing that we need to touch on. And
yeah, I think the trigger warning, yeah.
There is one trigger warning.
Yes.
Which is that this comic book does touch on the cultural phenomenon that is present in Japan, where mature adult men will pay teenage girls for their time. It's called, host culture. And there is a scene where an adult man makes what appears to be a sexually charged advance at a young girl. However, I think it's dealt with really well. I get why it's there, but it is worth noting that this comic book does have a comment to make about host culture in Japan.
See, I was referring more to the suicide and the abuse. Like, I thought those were the main parts to address first.
Trigger warning, suicide also.
Yes,
fair enough. Yeah.
Those are going to come up. And I was going to mention as well with the art, but like Bet said here, some scenes and panels with like the eerie imagery of someone who killed themselves, I thought was done really well here as well. Like, looking really creepy and eerie, and also didn't look, what's the word? Like, gratuitous. It wasn't like shock for shock value. Like, it was very story appropriate.
It's so interesting because the suicide stuff didn't register for me. And I think that's because I'm a little bit more familiar with Japanese fiction than you are. Particularly probably one of the most famous Japanese novels of the 20th century, which is Norwegian Wood by Haruki Murakami, which is almost entirely about suicide. And suicide is a very prevalent cultural topic in Japan. Japan has a high suicide rate, and it's sort of something that's baked into the culture in a way that is maybe a bit unfamiliar to Westerners.
Well,
hence why Logan Paul ran through that fucking forest like an idiot.
Yeah. I was going to say, I think it has become a bit more prevalent in especially young person fiction and television generally here as well. I mean, the main thing I think of is 13 Reasons Why, which was like a big cultural thing.
Oh, I'm not suggesting that suicide doesn't have a place culturally in the West, but it has a very specific place culturally in Japan.
Yeah, I was more saying it's like that's why I didn't just automatically equate it with Japanese culture. So I was like, yeah, it's big in Western culture now as well.
Whereas conversations about suicide and suicide are a huge cultural touchstone for Japanese people.
Yes,
it's a really prevalent part of the culture. It's a prevalent part of popular Japanese story, popular Japanese myth. It runs quite deep there. And it's so interesting that because I've read some Japanese books that are almost entirely about suicide, and I'm a bit aware of that cultural aspect, it didn't really register for me. But you're so right, it's really prevalent in this story, isn't it?
Yes, and here's as good as any place to make note of another bit of dialogue that I thought was noteworthy. This was actually more because I thought it was a bad bit of dialogue. And unfortunately, it kind of made me laugh despite the subject it's about. But the wording was in the narration, and it went over kind of 2 panels. And it was basically talking about the boy who killed himself. And he said, talking about him, said, so full of life. And then the next panel, until he died. And I was like, that was not a good line.
I mean, it's kind of a great line.
I mean, it's accurate, but it's kind of redundant,
Yeah.
So yeah, I just made a note of that. But so main story, what's interesting here is there's a lot of characters that come up that are existing characters in the main X-Men series.
Cool, yeah.
Right?
So who?
So I don't know them as much because they're part of what's called the New Mutants era.
Right.
Armor, the main character, I recognize. I've seen her in stuff. The other one was it May Storm? Or,
yeah.
I can't remember her name.
Was that just Storm?
I don't think it was Storm. So what was interesting was there's a reference to Storm where the character May, who I can't remember her mutant name, but I will bring it up now.
I don't think we know her mutant name yet, do we?
They did say it, or at least it's in the kind of intro part, and it is May Storm. So they reference actual Storm, or at least the Storm in this universe, because May is reading like her phone in the news, and there's a news story that says freedom fighter in West Africa seemingly has power of the Storm. And I was like, that's Storm.
Oh, that's cool.
So I love little Easter eggs like that. Again, not just reference like a different media or fiction or whatever, but like in-universe clues of what's going on in the larger world. And the reason there's probably freedom fighters is because they're probably resisting against this global cabal that's controlling the world, But again, nice little reference. In terms of the characters, I don't know many of the other smaller characters or this level characters because they're quite low on the rung X-Men characters. Like they're the characters that while the main X-Men were doing their stuff, they were like in Xavier's Institute, like learning to become X-Men kind of thing. Problem is, none of them really took off it's mainly because the main X-Men group have always been popular. Like none of them really fallen out of favor, probably because of like the cartoons and stuff, like how well they've gotten across. So they've kind of perpetually been the students. Like they've never kind of leveled up to main X-Men. But Armor is kind of the biggest one. The other one, which was really interesting to me, is actually not a mutant. But the character Nico Minoru, she is, I don't know if she's a mutant in this or not, but in the main series, in the main Marvel universe, she is more of a magic character. She's from a series called The Runaways.
Yeah.
And it's a great story.
I know this one.
There's a reason you know it, which I'll get to, but the story is that she's part of a group of kids who find out their parents are all supervillains who are meeting up and working together. Her parents are like witch and warlock kind of magical characters, so she gets this magical staff. And the reason that she's noteworthy, for you especially, is because she was created by the person who created The Runaways, which is Brian K. Vaughan of Wild Last Man.
One of my favorites.
Exactly. Yeah. And there was an interesting reference as well where she's in PE class and says she can't do PE because she's on a period.
Yeah.
The reason that was interesting to me is because the way her powers work, these magic powers, or at least this magic staff she has, is because to work, it has a prick thing on it that she needs to make herself bleed.
Yeah.
So it's like a blood kind of, like even just a droplet of blood, you then get to do magic with it. Yeah. And there's a bit in the comic where she does some magic and someone goes like, hey, you didn't even prick your finger on the thing. How'd they work? And she just stares at them. So when I realized who she was, I was like, oh, that's clever.
That's really cool.
A clever little reference.
Yeah.
Other than that, there is the main antagonist, who is an established X-Men character called the Shadow King. So this is why we're kind of covering spoilers in this part, because I think it is a bit of a reveal that that's who it is. Shadow King is a really interesting character in X-Men because he's, I'm pretty sure he's a character now who doesn't have a corporeal form. Like he's a purely psychic, ethereal, what's it called? Like, what's the thing where you project yourself? Like,
he's
an astral plane kind of character. Yeah, like a psychic based.
He's an astral projection as opposed to having a corporeal form.
I think he used to have a corporeal form, and I think that like early on he was killed. Like all enemies are seemingly killed in comics, but then it turns out, oh, he's such a powerful psychic, and this has been established with Charles Xavier and his unborn twin who was in Deadpool Wolverine recently. But yeah, he's now like a purely ethereal character who just invades people's minds and makes them see shit, and he creates this form of himself, which is the shadow monster, thus the Shadow King. So really interesting use of this character here, because I think, again, what I said earlier about the story, none of the characters can trust anything they see or hear.
Yeah.
And I was really, me, I'm always trying to like figure out what's going on. Yeah. Like always trying to work out like what the deal is of any scene. And I think it was good they got to a point where it's like, oh, nothing is real. Or like nothing you can count on is real.
Nothing is real. Exactly. Nothing to get hung about.
Even the Beals.
Strawberry fields forever.
Even the Beals were making X-Men references back in the day.
Totally.
So I like that. I like the like, I was one point, I was like, hang on, how did this person appear? And now no one's seen him. And is this person evil as well? And I was like, oh, it doesn't matter. Yeah. Like that's the point. That's the fun of this. That's the tension, is they can't trust anything. But in terms of the main story, I thought it was slow paced enough that it always got me asking what's going to happen next.
Yeah, it was a real slow burn, and that it didn't overplay its hand. And I think so much of what the big two put out needs to have a broad appeal. And so the issue with those stories is often that they don't want you to miss anything, and so they spell everything out, and there's all this exposition. And you are painfully aware of what's happening at all times because it's directing your eye exactly at the point in the story I want you to be at. Whereas this is not doing that. It's not pandering to you. It's not telling you what you should be thinking or reading. It just presents you with a story and lets you explore it. And I had a really different relationship with it to you. I wasn't always second guessing what was going on. I was just sort of turning pages and enjoying looking at the art and enjoying reading the dialogue. And just sort of following along with it. And there were points where I didn't have a fucking scoop what was going on, and I just sort of went, that's okay, it'll become apparent. Like when it's ready to tell me what's going on, it will do it, or the penny will drop and I'll work it out. And I was just having such a lovely time with it that it didn't bother me. And that's not to say that if you didn't want to do a real close reading of this and, pull at all the threads, you couldn't.
I mean, I did, and I still enjoyed it.
So. Yeah, and this is the thing, we enjoyed it in two very different ways, didn't we? I really like the storyline. So in issues 5 and 6, you're presented with a bit of a backstory for the Shadow King. So he is a mutant, and he was a weird fucking kid. He basically expressed that he could make other people hear his thoughts, or at least other people could hear his thoughts and he could hear theirs. And so his parents found this society group.
Yeah, this cult, which, great little reference. I think they call themselves Children of the Atom, which is like a common kind of nomenclature for mutants.
Yeah.
Like they call themselves that because they believe they are the future of mankind. So it's that.
So his parents find this group of mutants, the Children of the Atom.
Which we don't actually even know if they're real or not yet.
No.
Like it's theorized.
This is it. And so we see this story about him learning to harness his powers and use them. And he'd been behaving quite well until he essentially fell in love with this teenage girl and really wanted to be around her. And that was the way he had to do that, right? That was my reading of it.
I don't know if that's like a catalyst for anything or not, or if that's kind of something that's happening alongside.
Yeah.
I think there's a mystery so as of issue 6, I think there's still a bit of a mystery here. Well, there's a lot of mystery, but one specific question I think we still have is, what is Shadow King's connection to the boy who killed himself? So we know the main character, and unfortunately, because there's a lot of Japanese names, we are not using a lot of the names.
Yeah.
I'm going to call her Armor, because
that's totally fine.
She's not called that in this, she is Armor. Armor was good friends with this kid, and she feels, and a great aspect of this, I think, is the survivor's guilt she's having of not, I don't know if it's even survivor's guilt or just regret of feeling like she could have helped her friend. He was seemingly getting bullied, and again, at this point, seemingly took this way out. and she regrets not helping him when she could. So she feels a lot of guilt there, and the Shadow King is spurring on this guilt, literally. Like, and for me, picking this apart, I found there's a lot of interesting stuff here. Shadow King says, we failed him and we could have helped him.
Yeah.
And with other more kind of realistic comics, I think I would have been like, why isn't anyone picking up on this language? But I think this is more for the reader. And also, if you were being plagued by shadow hallucinations, you wouldn't be like, hang on, what pronoun did you use there? Because that's, or what specific language you used there? Because that's interesting. So I see why she didn't pick up on that. But I think for the reader perspective, it's interesting because we know there's a connection between the Shadow King and this boy. Seemingly, this boy only was friends with Armor.
Yeah.
So the mystery then is, why does this other boy care about this boy passed away? So I think that's really interesting. Again, especially her guilt, I think is portrayed in a really great way, because it's not. If it wasn't for the Shadow King, I don't think she'd be overtly showing this. We're told this in. There's this whole, this debate about like show don't tell. You can show stuff by telling it.
Yeah,
and that's
totally.
not the same as tell opposed to show.
Yeah, no, totally.
We are told that she has not been attending school.
Yeah.
And her mum doesn't know, because her mum doesn't talk about it at all.
Yeah.
So that shows us that she's obviously avoiding everyone at the school, probably because of this guilt, we later find out. So I think the way they are presenting her initially is very smart. And then when we get the Shadow King stuff, it almost kind of allows the comic to be like overtly like, this is what's happening. This is what she feels guilty about, because she's got a hallucinating Shadow King who's bringing up this guilt and showing her awful visions of her friend and essentially his body, like his hanging body. So I think it kind of has its cake and eats it too, by being like doing the really subtle stuff and then the really overt, like, this is what you're guilty about. And I think it works. Like, not many other comics can kind of get away with doing both. So I really enjoyed that aspect. The mystery, like, of not knowing what's happening with this kind of cabal of mutants, maybe. We still don't know, like, what the whole mutant thing is, because, like, it might be the same as the main universe, where people just have this gene and in adolescence start to show powers.
Yeah.
But there's also this element of, like, did Armor Shadow King gives Armor
an amulet?
Yeah. And then she has the power. And that does not fit with main universe mutant.
No, and then obviously you've got the witch who has the staff, and I'm pretty sure there's some component to Storm's powers.
May Storm, we don't know, because, so again, bit of mystery, which again, my lateral thinking, I'm trying to work this out, and it isn't obvious yet, but it's something I want to know.
Yeah.
May Storm, or May, is scratched by the cat owned by the Shadow King.
Yeah. And
there's like a residue or something left by the cat. But again, that does not fit mutadom. Same with the amulet. It doesn't fit mutadom stuff. So I'll tell you what, one issue I had with the writing, and just a little nitpicking thing, I was like, why was this kind of arranged the way it was? May and Armor are talking about their powers and stuff.
Yeah.
No, they're not even talking about it. They're at the sidelines of PE. Nico is doing something, which I can't remember. She's holding something. She looks at them and goes, "Oh, you guys are mutants." And they're like, "What? Mutant? What?" And then that's the end of an issue. And I'm like, great ending to an issue. Like, because I immediately want to know what happens next. Next issue, they don't pick this up.
They don't address it again.
They don't pick up till the following issue. And that's how I was like, hang on. Like, if you were them, you would immediately be like, what did you call us? And what do you know about our powers?
Yeah,
like,
totally.
So that was one bit I was like, I don't understand why it's.
I think that was I think that was intended to tell you about her and not them. I think that was intended to be a very apt way of showing you that she was psychic.
But again, even they don't pick that up next issue.
No, you're right. It is picked up and dropped.
Yeah. It was great when it happened.
Yeah.
It's just not followed up on.
And again, this is the kind of stuff that we wouldn't have time to talk about in a normal Marvel or DC comic, because there'd be so many gaping issues.
Yes.
Like, this is nitpicky shit, isn't it?
Yeah, and I am enjoying nitpicky, because maybe the next issue doesn't happen chronologically after that
totally.
Stuff. Like, there's no reason to say it definitely did or didn't. So it's not glaring enough that I'm like, this is a plot hole, but it's enough that I'm like, it's weird they didn't pick this up immediately next issue.
And I am in agreement with you.
Or at least give a reason why it wasn't picked up, because seemingly they were hanging out not talking about the fact of like, hey, apparently we're mutants or something. Like, that's a big deal. Maybe we should get into that now. Like, they kind of move on and then come back to it later. But But again, I enjoyed it as I was going.
I feel as though we've sort of exhausted the comic talk.
I think the only other part, one part I thought was a bit glaring, the way they came up with the name X-Men.
I liked that.
I was like, you're grasping at straws.
Oh,
here.
I thought that was quite charming.
So they're like, we should call us X's because we should use the letter X because we're all really bad at school and we're getting X's on our tests. And I was like, bit weird, but fine. Like, that's a bit of a stretch, but I'll allow that. But the way they go to X Team.
Yeah.
And then she goes, all right, we'll call ourselves X-Men. It's like 5 girls. Why do they call themselves the X-Men?
Because that's what it's called, and it's a name that exists, and they had to get it in somehow. And I thought it was nice. And I thought the joke there was that it doesn't make any sense. They're just like spitballing. I
would have preferred it was the use of men, which I thought was like just weird because why would they say that? I would have I like the X's thing, like that was cute, and I think if they just literally stuck with like X Team, that would have been enough of a reference for me to be like, I get what you're doing and I like it. The fact they went so far to X-Men, I was like,
I get it.
That's they're already using mutants. Like, there's already enough reference. I felt like that was just a step too far in trying to connect
but it was kind of cute.
I don't know.
To surmise, though, given that we've just ended on all our nitpicks,
I have one more. It's a weird one, right? You must have seen this as well. When May first gets her powers, right? We first see her powers. Also, really good point, actually, the depiction of her dysfunctional family.
Yeah.
I thought that was really good. Like, the seemingly normal parents, her parents are like, hey, can you pop over next door and introduce yourself because they're new and we haven't met them yet? Like, seemingly normal family at the breakfast table kind of thing. And then later in the day, she comes back and the parents are fighting. And the dad, who was like just stern at the paper in the morning and you didn't think twice about it, is still stern while the mum's shouting at him and accusing him of having an affair. And she's yelling at May like, he's not listening to me, he's not reacting to me, he's not even reacting to anything. And then for May, I thought, again, a great depiction of where these people are. May's just like, well, yeah, he always does. That's like, if she was like, oh my God, what's going on? You'd be like, that feels appropriate. That's like,
and it's
our
the
reaction.
Point later on when she comes down and she's like, I can't deal with you lot fighting all the time. Like, can you just stop shouting at each other?
Yeah. So I really like that depiction. I thought that was great.
No, I agree.
My nitpick is that she then causes a storm in the kitchen. Like a real great kind of moment of like, oh my God, this person suddenly has powers.
And her dad just kicks her out.
Exactly. The dad's just like, no, the dad says, I made a note of it. The dad says, I don't need punks like you in this house. Yeah. It's like, your daughter just made a storm in the kitchen. Like, what do you mean? Like, and
I mean, I think that's just meant to indicate how disinterested he is with his family, right?
But that's another deadbeat dad. It's like your kids shooting laser beams out of their eyes. It's like, yeah, but I've checked out emotionally. Like, what are you on about?
But I've checked out emotionally.
That was
no,
my
I
issue.
get it. I see it.
It's great. It made me laugh, and I was like, a rare misfire in this.
I think this is one of those instances, and you have them sometimes, where you're willing to forgive something a lot of sins because you like it and because it charms you and it speaks to you. And this really spoke to me, and so a lot of those things, I'm like, yeah, I see them. And they're not an issue for me, though.
It was enough that I was like, I'm making a note of it. I still really like the
comic. Bring it up.
I'm going to bring it up on my podcast. but yeah, what could explain it potentially, and I'm only realizing this now talking out, maybe he's a part of this cabal and maybe he knows about this stuff. But even then, I feel like if he does secretly know us, he'd be like, oh, whoa, you have powers that I didn't know anything. Like, whoa, that's crazy. Like,
you'd think he would at least have a conversation with her where he's like, you realize the normal humans don't like us very much. You need to not do that.
Exactly.
Anywhere other than here for a bit, kidder.
It just, there's questions that maybe will all be answered and everything, and maybe retroactively, then I'll be like, I'll hold my hands up and say, that's fair enough, it made complete sense in retrospect. But looking at it at the moment, I was just like, that's weird. So yeah, I think that's pretty much the story. Again, in terms of covering all, really interesting, paced in a way that I really want to find out what happens.
So worth reading, and I think this is a writer and an artist who we need to be keeping an eye on.
100%, yeah.
Like, I think she's going to go on to do some really big things. I mean, she's doing something really big and exciting right now. But I think this is a series to keep an eye on. I definitely think it's worth reading. I think it's worth going and getting some hard copies of it if you can.
Yep.
Just voting with your feet on this one, you know. they've done something cool, fucking tell them that you think it's cool.
How would you, at some point, like to do some more Ultimate Universe stuff?
Yeah, let's do it.
Yeah?
If it's as good as this.
Because it's all experimenting, we don't know what the
If
quality
it's anywhere near as good as this.
Well, there's one, so there's a main Ultimates title, and that's like the big universe stuff with, that's Jonathan Hickman running that.
Fair.
There's one pre-issue thing you need to read before, like a single issue thing you need to read before that. But yeah, we could do that. Or there's, I don't know who writes or draws it, but there's a Black Panther Ultimate.
I've never read any Black Panther. That could be fun.
So yeah, we've got...
I mean, it just feels like sticky territory for two white dudes, doesn't it?
I mean, we can at least be like, how did you enjoy the story? Like, was the action and everything fun? I mean, we're two white guys talking about this Asian culture.
It's very
Japanese
true. Yeah,
culture,
it's
so
very true.
I think at least just being like, hey, there's some parts which might not speak to us, but at least we can talk about every other aspect of it, like general story beats and character and stuff like that.
I hear that.
So yeah, we've got some options. So yeah, I think that's Ultimate X-Men covered, and unfortunately moving on to a slightly darker topic.
Rest in peace to John Cassaday.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And again, like I said earlier, for my sins, I didn't know much of his work before now, but as with a lot of celebrity passings, it's only after they're gone that the people who know the work kind of celebrate it, and then the people who don't know only find out because of the situation.
And I think what's interesting here is just how far-reaching his work was.
Apparently, he was a main artist on a series called Planetary, which I've not read, but apparently a lot of people were raving like a lot about it, like highly regarded, so that's good. I did appreciate that he did the art for Astonishing X-Men.
Yeah, and this is where I think a lot of people will have seen his work.
I think it's maybe I did not hear about Planetary, so I don't know how big a piece of work that was. I have heard of Astonishing X-Men specifically. It's not just I've heard of X-Men, I've heard of this specific run.
And specifically, the artwork on that run is beloved.
Yeah, exactly.
It's one of those things that it's not just that he drew a popular comic book, it's that the art is particularly special. And again, I had a look through and was really blown away by some of it.
Yeah,
I thought some of it was really amazing.
He seems to be very good at like proportions of bodies, like and
which
stances.
You know, that's like so important to me in comic books,
and especially with superheroes, because they're always doing the superhero landings. They're always doing weird they're always flying or web swinging in weird poses. So if you're good at that, I think that's a really huge advantage for a superhero comic artist. So go, and again, especially with X-Men, goes to show why he was well regarded. Like,
and I think this is. What happened today, I think, is really interesting because, we talked a little bit about it before we recorded and we were like, oh, this is really sad. Like, this amazing artist has passed away and, neither of us were that familiar with him. And then it just so happened that we were due to talk about a character that he co-created.
Yep.
And I think that's what is so... It's made me realise what's so special about this medium is that because of the constant iteration... you're constantly seeing new iterations of old characters or new retellings of old stories. And it's this thing that keeps churning and it keeps churning out the same story and the same story and the same story. And you'd think that would be to its detriment. But what it means is that one person can come in and innovate and create a new character or change the way that a character's story is told, like change their backstory or their origin story or create this new character. And it has a ripple effect. And, you and I don't know John Cassaday's work that well in the pantheon of great comic book artists, but we did just fall in love with this new comic that's making use of a character that he created. And so without him, we wouldn't have had the cool fucking shit we read today.
And especially, I don't know if you saw any of his original works of Armor.
Yes.
But drawing a character where you have a character within a psychic armor and then proportioning them to like move and mid-fight and stuff like that, I think was a bit of a feat. Like not something that any artist could just randomly be assigned to do.
Yeah.
I think it's a credit that the character looked as good as she did with a pretty unique thing. Like draw a person. Most artists, I think that's like a standard, isn't
Draw
it?
another person around them.
Yeah. And they're an armored psychic person and they're doing the same moves, or maybe they're doing different moves.
Yeah.
Like maybe it works that way and make it look cool. Like that's all these additional requirements where I think he did a great job on.
Yeah. And so I think given that you and I don't have the deepest relationship with John Cassaday's work, I'd be really interested to hear from our listeners who I know their shit about comic books. Tell me some stuff in the comments that we should be reading by John Cassaday, because I'd love to have a bit of a curated experience. Obviously, I can just Google him and read a bunch of stuff that he'd written, but I'd love to have a more curated experience from you guys as to what you think we should be reading by John Cassaday, what he drew, some characters that he created, some stuff that really puts his best foot forward, and maybe we'll talk about some.
Yep. And if, there's the Facebook group that you can find us and put us all on that. In terms of next week, we haven't got anything specific, but we've got a couple of bigger titles to do after that. So it's kind of it's in the middle of like our big mainstream characters. So maybe we'll do the one for us, one for them.
And I think we're about to start gearing up for the winter, aren't we?
I mean, autumn technically.
Well, yeah, I mean, it's technically autumn, but really over the past 3 days, it became winter in the UK.
Yeah, in 2 days.
Yeah,
like, literally
mental,
2 days.
Isn't it?
Shall I find a kind of weird out there one?
Yeah, let's do it.
Because then the weeks after that, and I'll say this now, there's Hellboy coming out.
Cool.
So there's a Hellboy comic that we can do with that, which I think would be good. And this is one...
You like Hellboy, don't you?
I've not actually read any Hellboy.
Have you not?
I really like the Hellboy films, especially the Guillermo del Toro films are fantastic. So I'm eager and excited to read a Hellboy comic.
Yeah.
The week after that is a really interesting one because the film that's coming out is Joker 2 or Joker A Folie Deux or whatever it's called.
Let's just do a Killing Joke.
This is what I was going to suggest.
We've had it. We've not done a lot of Moore, and then we're going to do. Well, I suppose we did 2 whole weeks on Moore, didn't we? Was last week an Alan Moore week?
No, last week was Penguin. That was Tom King week.
Oh yeah, last week was
the other
Tom
great
King.
Comic book writer.
See, this is the thing, man. I know you're a big Tom King fan. And to be honest with you, I've had a more sort of hit and miss relationship with it.
Yeah.
A lot of comic book nerds, sort of, when you say Tom King, they go, oh, that's a divisive one.
He is divisive, yeah.
Why is he so divisive? Because for you, he's the GOAT, isn't he?
He's one of the GOATs, absolutely. It's because he's written a lot of my favorite comics, but the consensus is, if he's doing his own thing, and by anything, just like a limited series, whichever character he's got, he does great. When he was in the mainline Batman story, when he took over that, his stuff, I think, felt a bit like it was dragging a bit, and like he wasn't getting to points, and it was kind of meandering, and which in his own stuff, when he's got his whole set plan, he knows where it's going, so you can take a while to get there.
Because what's interesting is when I've had these conversations with people, and I've mentioned Tom King, and they've gone, oh, and I go, but his Supergirl run, and they're like, oh yeah, I heard it's good.
Yeah,
I'm like, yeah, his Supergirl run's really good, or his Green Arrow.
He had Human Target, Miracle Man, and Vision are the main ones. Yeah.
And so, but it's his Supergirl run that is like the thing that he did that I was like, wow, that's really great.
Yes,
I really loved it, didn't I? And I mentioned that, and they're like, oh yeah, I heard that was good. And I'm like, it's not just good, it's really good. And so, yeah, it's just interesting because obviously a lot of the time when I have comic book conversations, it's with you and it's on this podcast. So it's been fun for me to talk to some other comic book nerds.
The other thing with Tom King, which I've seen a lot, and I do kind of agree with, is he does have a way of like kind of butchering or assassinating some characters to support of like what he's doing. The biggest example of that, I think, is Guy Gardner, Green Lantern, and Human Target. Real asshole in that. Great character, like really interesting. But if you were a Guy Gardner fan and then you read Human Target, you'd be pissed off. And again, in Human Target, another prime example in Human Target is Martian Manhunter, who is meant to be this big hero along the tier of like Superman and Wonder Woman in terms of like power and stuff. And in that, he's hooking up with a woman with fire powers because he may be a bit of a masochist and likes to be burnt. So I think, again, if you're a Martian Manhunter fan, it's like, oh yeah, he's my number one guy, my favorite superhero. What's he doing now?
Yeah,
like, that's another common
He's having
complaint.
kinky fire sex.
There was another big one, which, again, I don't think it's his fault. Another example of when he's given a main title to do. He did one called Heroes in Crisis. So this was DC. They constantly try and rework the word crisis to, And great premise. I think you'll agree. It's about a place in the DC universe where superheroes go to deal with PTSD and trauma of their life.
We've talked about this.
Yeah. Unfortunately, it's really bad. Or it's great premise. It falls off the rails. It's a really shitty ending.
Yeah.
And I think if he has a main big title that there's a lot riding on, his style doesn't work for that. If you give him his own thing, like give him a character and you say he can do whatever he wants with them, he does some great stuff.
Yeah.
So I think that's the kind of controversy of him.
Should I tell them what book I'm reading at the moment?
Yes, yeah, let's do that.
So I'm currently reading the follow-up to the Satsuma Complex.
By one Robert Mortimer.
By Bob Mortimer, yeah. I'm reading Hotel Avocado by Bob Mortimer, and I'm thoroughly enjoying it. It's really great. It's more of the same, really. I mean, it's definitely a sequel, and I don't think it has the same level of magic that Satsuma Complex has. But that being said, I'm only 150 pages in. It's, it's a novel. It's a relatively standard, like 250 to 300 page novel. I was excited enough about it that I went and bought a £22 signed copy from Waterstones, where I could have just got it for a tenner in the supermarket.
Wow.
I mean, I'm a whore for a signed first edition, aren't I? But I'm reading it and really enjoying it, and it's taking up all my lunch breaks at work, and I'm quite contentedly reading instead of just chatting shit with people, which is lovely.
That's good. So with that, I'm guessing you'll have an ending, or like not an ending, but like you'll have a finished it, surmised review of it to give us. Maybe not next week, but at some point soon. Yeah,
so at some point within the next couple of weeks, I'll be able to tell you that I finished it and what I thought of it.
And can recommend it, possibly.
I mean, based on the first 150 pages, I'd recommend it.
And its previous books as well, I'm guessing.
Yeah, I mean, again, it's a sequel to the Satsuma Complex, so if you enjoyed that, you'll probably like this.
That's fair. I am about to start a comic book series from last year called Gods, or it might be GODS, because it's Gods, like the capitals with the periods. But Jonathan Hickman, big universe stuff, but I don't know if it's still going, and he does seem to be focusing on the Ultimate Universe stuff, which is preferred, so we'll see how that goes. I tried a Flash comic, which was really interesting. I read one issue and I'm not continuing with it, but it was really to the point where I almost considered us covering it just to kind of get your take on it.
Flashpoint ruined Flash for me.
Well, this is why I want to try a new one, because I was like, I haven't really the reason I've tried Flash comics, and my problem with them is it was the same. I've tried 2 Flash comics now, and my problem with them both was
you quite liked Flashpoint.
I enjoy Flashpoint more for like its effect on the
because Flashpoint's revered, isn't it? It's quite highly regarded.
It's a noteworthy story. I don't know if revered might be too much. I really like the animated movie, which tightens things up a lot and has less Deus Ex character. Like,
I love that I've coined that and you've started using it.
At one point, I will show you the animated movie just to see how you kind of like it preferred. But my problem with Flash, the 2 Flash comics I've tried is in the first issue, there's an antagonist who's faster than him, and I'm like, that's just. You need to run faster. Like, that's the thing.
It often feels that the conflict that the Flash has to resolve within himself is that he needs to run faster.
Essentially, yeah. And it also is doing this whole big stuff about, it's never like, I know it's hard, the fastest man alive is not going to be like a grounded down to earth story, but I think it'd be better if it was, because in both ones it's all about like the speed force and dimensions and it's hard to describe the science of it because it's kind of magic as well, even though I call it science. And oh no, like I'm dealing with being so fast, and oh no, there's a thing that's faster than me, and oh, how am I going to deal with that? And like I feel like, I don't know, maybe I've read some bad ones, but again, and this wasn't bad. It seemed like the best story there wasn't for me. If that makes sense. There was a lot of waffling about like, oh, I need to do this and this because the Speed Force works this way and this. And I'm like, just save some people or have a crisis. Like, just do something interesting. Rather than, there's another person faster than me. I'm falling into another dimension. Like, it was a lot for a short space of time. So that maybe on that recommendation, maybe try the Flash comic from 2023, or maybe don't. I don't know.
Maybe don't.
But yeah, that's where I'm at right now.
Cool.
So take us home.
So thank you so much for listening. We have a Facebook group now. It's the Comic Literate Podcast on Facebook.
Yep. I'm slowly uploading some old reels to it just to see what they do in the kind of new Facebook space.
I mean, really, we just wanted to build a community space where we could come and hang out. So if you do want to, talk about the podcast, just go there and do that. And that would be really great. And we'd really, really love to see you there.
I'll tell you what you would enjoy, I think, while we're in this space, some comments that we did receive on some of the Alan Moore, some of the Watchmen videos.
Oh, yeah, let's do it.
So
this has been like a nice little episode. We've not just talked about the comic. It's been like a wrap-up episode as well.
And it was also a really good comic. So it's kind of the best of both.
It was a great comic. I think, obviously it's sad that we did a eulogy. But also, just talking about what we're up to and what we're reading and what we're thinking about. It's cool. It's fun.
So there's someone at Hey5947 who had some really interesting takes, like on Watchmen as a whole, which I thought was good. He or they, she or they, I do not know. They have a male avatar, but what the fuck does that mean these days? They said, as long as, talking about just Watchmen, in the quote, as long as there is a government, there will always be mistrust for it. And apparently this is what they meant by the phrase, we commonly see who watches the Watchmen. And then they get into the comments on the YouTube channel if you want to check out more, but talking about how Moore's an anarchist and quite decent take, like some good insight. And then later, where I talked about Chekhov's gun with Laurie, Laurie picks up the gun apparently from when they're in Manhattan after the squid attack. Yeah. And that's why it's Chekhov approved. And I made note on the page that Chekhov is the biggest contributor to gun violence. Nice. I thought was a bit of a laugh. Oh, and Moore is an actual wizard. So yeah, thanks for the comments and keep them coming if you can.
Yeah, thank you so much. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Goodbye.